This episode is brought to you by our friends at Better Man. Better Man is helping men everywhere have a clear biblical vision of manhood that changes everything. You could check them out at betterman.com. That is betterman.com.
You're doing it.
Ahoy! Kelly, what am I doing?
I don't know. What are you doing?
Kelly,
I know what sounds you're trying to create.
What's it sound like?
A ship.
A ship. Well, good on you, matey, because that was a ship. You know why we're making ship sounds tonight?
Wow. Because
#perfect segue, we are talking about ships tonight. What kind of ships, Jimmy? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Relationships. The best kind of ships I know.
Oh.
Try to follow that.
I won't, because
Okay.
I think that may be one of the cornier intros that
You know,
have done.
sometimes when I do these intros and they just happen, like it's not scripted. I do it and I think about immediately my friend Trip. You guys know Trip Lee, hip hop artist. He's one of my best friends in the world, and he also, I think, probably considers me the just corniest, least funny human that he knows.
No, that's not true.
And I think how cool he is and how embarrassed he would be to sit by me at that moment.
He would be embarrassed.
He would be.
And he would also
Trip,
laugh.
if you're listening, I love you. I really do. You're the kind of ship I want to be aboard. A relationship with you, my friend. I didn't like any of that. Okay. Nope.
That was terrible.
Nope.
I'm sorry, Trip.
Okay. We'll edit that out. Welcome to Clearly, guys. What are we doing, Kelly?
You already introduced it. We're talking about relationships.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
And in this season, to like simmer us down, get slightly more serious, which is hard to do after that.
It is.
This whole season is about putting God back at the center of all things, including.
Do you need a moment?
Do you need a moment?
It was. Let's go back to it for a moment, because what?
For real?
Well, no, let's not. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on.
We're good.
God at the center of all things. We talked last time about food and then about work before that, and we
did talk about food last time. That's right.
We did. It was so fun. Yeah. And talking about relationships now, specifically the realm of relationships that fall into that category of romantic relationships, dating, marriage, and then family, which kind of falls into that marriage category. So we want to talk about all those things in the next couple of episodes. And
was family in the romantic relationship portion of your? That's sort of the fruit of a romantic relationship, isn't it? Yeah.
We're not.
You get romantic enough, and then you're starting to talk about family. Go ahead.
We're not talking about friendships. We're talking about dating and marriage and all related things.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, and tonight, mainly we're focusing on sort of the marriage family slice of the pie.
If you're interested in the dating conversation, that is coming next time.
Next week.
But the reason for that is we really feel like if you don't understand the marriage conversation, you cannot understand the dating conversation.
It's good.
So that's why we're starting in this order. So marriage first, dating second.
That's right.
And looking at how do we keep God in the center of this relationship. So that's what this episode is about marriage. How do we keep this, how do we keep God at the center of marriage?
Yeah.
So,
if he's at the center of everything, what does that mean for our marriage relationships? Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you this, out the gate, if God really is the center of your whole sort of ecosystem, marriage now takes on new meanings that our culture doesn't give us, right? And so maybe some of this is paradigm shifting for you. Maybe this is a refresher for you, but we wanted to identify what we think are maybe 4 key ways that marriage changes its focus in light of God being the center. Mm-hmm. If God is the center, then marriage is for what now? Our culture would say all kinds of different answers. some things they would say marriage is it's for self-fulfillment. It's sort of the
Right.
cherry on top of your
Mm-hmm.
like whatever the life you're trying to assemble for
Right.
yourself.
It's I don't know. It's the marriage conversation culturally is all over the map right now. So
A lot of people don't even want to get married.
Right.
Maybe it's not a
They
cherry on
don't
top.
see
Maybe
the
it's
reason for it, or maybe they just see tax benefits to it, and some people see no benefit to it. And then, of course, the definition of marriage is getting confused. We're not even going to get into all that.
Yeah.
But I think even within the Christian space, and I think if we can do this briefly before we
Oh,
even
we
get
can do
into
this.
those 4 points, to just personally just talk a little bit about our own marriage just briefly, because really we don't want to talk about all the cultural things so much as go, even as a Christian, you can enter into marriage with a clear sense of marriage is one man and one woman forever, and understand covenant, all these things, and still practice marriage without God at the center.
Mhm.
And we would say the reason we feel like this is an important conversation is because we really believe the statement that when life gets better, when God's the center. When
Mhm.
God's the center of your marriage gets better. Marriage thrives with God as the sun in the middle of it,
Mhm.
not the marriage itself, not you.
Your partner, yeah.
And
right.
we've experienced that. We have a friend of ours that we had a couple over recently, and they asked us, what was the hardest year of your marriage, best year of your marriage? And we were both like, oh, easy. We could both like do the whole
Yeah.
newlywed game show, write it on boards secretly and show it, and it would be exactly the same answer. No
First year,
question.
last year.
That's right.
That's right.
First year is absolutely the hardest. It was the worst. It was so terribly hard. And it just got better from there.
Yeah.
It literally has just been an upward climb. And it's like, what's the best year? Right now.
Yeah,
This is the best year.
that's right.
And next year will probably be better.
Yeah.
But it was like we started in the trenches of hard, where like literally, and you know this, you've read my journals, but like 10 days into marriage, I'm writing in my journal, what did I do? This is
I have that effect on people.
But really, I had early on, we were married at 20, and in the earliest days of living into this new life, I was going, this is not what I expected. This is much harder than I thought. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to live in this new world, in this space. It's overwhelming. It's hard. And I didn't think that was what was going to happen. I thought you get married and you're not lonely anymore and everything is awesome. And you're with this person who, you know, you love, and it's just going to be roses. It's going to be awesome.
Mhm.
And it was the opposite. And for you as well.
Mhm.
And we've talked about that some on the podcast before, but when we look at the trajectory, the upward trajectory of starting in the low of low and moving up,
Mhm.
what we're going to talk about in this episode is what we've seen be the consistent force to bring us from a lot of pain, a lot of hard, a lot of not fun, into a lot of joy, freedom, flourishing, good things. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, as God became our everything in our personal lives, that spilled over into our marriage. And these, I would say, 4 principles, realities about marriage are what, when we look back on our
Mhm.
marriage, we go, oh, these are the things that it's really about, now that we know that, no, God is absolutely the central point of it all. So
Yep.
that's where we landed with this. So
All right.
let's jump in. If God's the center of everything, then what is marriage for? The first thing that we're going to say about this, and this isn't us really, this is just the Bible, is marriage is for God's glory. That may feel like, again, duh to some of you. Maybe to others of you, you're like, I don't even know what that means. How is my marriage for the glory of God? If you wanted another way to say it, you could say, your marriage does not exist for you. It is not about you and your spouse. It is about God.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're just ripping this out of the Bible. We're just
Right.
we're just ripping off Paul at this point, because Paul, when he's looking at the Ephesian church, he's functionally saying exactly that.
Right. Mhm.
He's trying to coach husbands and wives. He gives them sort of their marching orders, how they're to relate to each other. And if you remember in Ephesians 5, his closing remark in verse 32, he says, this mystery is profound, and I'm saying that it refers to Christ and his church. This mystery, this whole thing of marriage is profound. And what I'm saying is, like, how you interact with each other, how you relate to each other, how you love and submit to each other, that whole bundle right there
Right.
is actually about, not you guys,
Mm-hmm.
it's about Christ and the church. So for me, every marriage that I've officiated now,
Mhm.
I'm saying the same thing to that couple when I'm looking at them. I'm saying the most important thing you need to remember about your marriage is it is a parable.
Mhm.
You need to know that your marriage is a parable. Now, what do we mean by that? What is a parable? Parable is like a down here story that's
Mhm.
telling an up there story,
Yep.
right? It's a small story that's saying something about a bigger story. And when you begin to embrace that as a couple, a married couple, now it's not only the stakes are higher, but it's the value of this thing that we have has just gone through the roof, because now the way I interact with Kelly and she interacts with me is not just a reflection of like our personal character or like, are we decent people? It's actually saying true things or false things about Jesus Christ and his bride.
Yeah.
Kind of a big deal.
It's a big deal. And the reality is, if you're listening to this and you are married, it's like, wow, I'd love for my marriage to reflect Christ in the church. But my spouse, my husband, my wife is not doing that. It's like, well, the commands from Paul are not husbands and wives do these things. He addresses them as individuals. Wives, do
Here's your
this.
role. Yeah.
And do it for the sake of Christ. Husbands, do this. Do it for the sake of Christ. You cannot, the call to live the parable of marriage is a call to you as an individual spouse. You fulfill your role, regardless of what the other person does, for the sake of Christ. And that's really hard to do, but is the thing that tells this other nuance of God's character in marriage, right? That God is a covenant-keeping God. He keeps his covenant even when we don't. He fulfills his end of the deal to people who don't always do that. And when we do that in marriage, I am going to love my spouse. I'm going to, for me as a wife, I'm not going to love my spouse. I'm going to respect him, work to honor him, work to submit to him as much as I can, even if he's in rebellion. This is what Peter would tell us in 1 Peter chapter 3. Wives, submit to your husbands, even if they're disobedient to the word. Yes, even if they're in rebellion against God, as much as it is within your power, stay under their authority. What?
Yeesh.
Why? Because you are telling the story of the covenant-keeping nature of God in your marriage.
Yes.
And that beautifies God.
I'm going to interrupt because it's been so awesome to watch you we've got, obviously, because I'm a pastor at church and our lives are really tethered with so many folks at our church. Like, we've got to be in so many marriage stories of other people. And I've got to watch you, even recently, present this truth to a gal whose marriage was really suffering. I mean, like to any other spectator, it'd be like, well, that thing ain't gonna work. And to hear you give that counsel to this woman who virtually every other voice in her ear is saying something counter to that. And you go, is that going to bear fruit, or is that just going to be an oppressive truth that hangs over and it makes her feel guilty for being in a lousy marriage when she should really get the heck out of there? But what's so beautiful about this is just even in the past weeks, like recently, we've watched reconciliation happen between her and him. We've watched healing happen. We've watched repentance happen on his end. And the difference maker has been that woman embracing that this thing I'm in with this guy is not about me.
And it's not about him.
And it's not about him. It's about me telling the world and him and myself true things about my God and the way he keeps his covenant even when we're lousy at it.
Right.
And we've watched restore marriages. So I think there's a cynic in all of us that like goes, that is like, nobody does that. Nobody takes that. Let's just go find easy button and hit and slam that thing. And it's like, no, can we just testify to you? I don't even know where you are listening in your marriage, but I'm just saying, like, this truth actually has the power to know that God, your marriage is for God's glory, actually has the power to heal your marriage if you'll embrace it, as hard as it is.
Yeah. And it's a very, very, very powerful sermon to see a spouse to see a husband or wife love their spouse when they're not getting loved back. That's so does not happen culturally. You don't see it in the church very often, honestly. So to say, I'm gonna stay and I'm gonna love you, and I'm gonna do that not even for your sake. You're not worthy of that. Christ is worthy of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was really helpful for me to go, because we're all sinners, right? I have sinned against you, Jimmy. You've sinned against me. And there are times where we've had to love each other in the midst of our own failings. And that's hard to do because you look at each other and you're like, well, he doesn't deserve that. It's like, no, he doesn't. Of course not. You're not doing it for him. It's not as long as you think you're loving your spouse for their sake, you won't be able to do it. It's not a strong enough reason. And every flaw and every mistake they make will be a reason for you not to fulfill what God has called you to do. But if I tell myself, no, I am called to be the best wife possible, not for Jimmy's sake, but for Christ's sake, it's like, all right, I can be about that. I can do that. That is a strong motivation for me and tells the world the right truth.
And this is really an echo of 2 episodes ago when we were talking about work and employment. It's like the only way you're going to survive a tough work environment or like work well for that lousy boss is if you know that's not your real boss.
That's right.
If Jesus is your real boss, like the scripture tells us, now I have the proper motivation. I actually get to honor Christ in the way I treat this man or woman. And in the same way that principle holds true in marriage too. We're doing it for another. We're doing it for Christ and to say true things about him and the way we carry ourselves. Right. So that's first.
Yes. And as we move on to the second point, I feel like I always have to say this. If you are listening and you're having that question of, as a wife especially, do I submit in a marriage all the time, even when there's abuse, even when I'm being asked to do sinful things? It's like, no, of course not. And now this is where you need to be in a local body of believers. Amen. Because we do not know your situation, but you need people who do know it.
Yeah.
And people who know you and know your spouse need to be speaking into that, because there are situations that require a different form of counsel than what we're giving. This is general counsel to, we would say, majority of marriages, a vast majority of marriages. But there are a few that need specified counsel. If that's where you're at, you need to go to your local church. If you don't have one, you need to find one. If you don't know where to start, send us an email and we can help with that, get you started. But we would say 95% or more of marriages we've encountered need this counsel.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
good. Okay. Marriage is for God's glory. It is for his beautification in the world through how you live that out.
That's right.
Number two,
this is going to sound similar to the first, but it's a nuance. Your marriage is for God's kingdom. It's for his kingdom as well. Or to say it another way, it's for the advancement of his kingdom. So I remember early on when me and Kelly are friends, she's playing in my band. I'm like all about her. She doesn't know I exist, except that I, pay her to play violin for me. And we're on the road and I'm just watching this girl and I'm being blown away by there's one moment in particular. We go in this gas station one night on our way back from a show, and nobody's in there except the checkout lady and, up at the counter, and Kelly's just being sweet, loving this woman. And then I find a way to like get the gospel conversation going and watching this sort of tag team thing start to happen between me and Kelly, and just watching that unfold and go, oh my gosh, this is like amazing. Like, you're really nice to people. And I say like really offensive things to people, and that works together somehow. Like this thing could work. And I'm watching that happen, and it starts occurring to me like, oh, like this is a partnership that when we come together, we're actually a force for Christ in a way that me independently am not so much. And it was a little marker for me of like, oh, this relationship right here, this could be something. We'll probably get to that in the dating episode next week too, but suffice it to say, it was one of the things that brought us together was realizing the way God's designed both of us complement each other in such a way that when we're together, God's kingdom moves farther down the court than when we're not. And that should be one of the calculations that we're making when we're thinking about what's the point of this thing, this union.
Because a lot of times we tend to think that marriage is just for me, for my comfort, maybe it's in my dreams, this is part of my life plan. I would love for this to play out, But our marriage does exist in a way to advance the agenda of someone other than ourselves. And that's how you see marriage first come on the
That's right.
scene in Genesis 2. You don't see it as Adam is lonely and he needs a companion. That's not the way it's framed. He says it's not good that he's alone, which is a different word than lonely. I would make that argument. I've made it in some of my books that he is in the presence of the living God without the hindrance of sin. That man it is good with him.
Yeah.
But he's alone. And God is about to give him this huge task of cultivating the garden, right? And exercising dominion over the earth. And it's like, it's not good for him to be alone. You need to create a helper suitable for him. An Azer, that doesn't mean, helper doesn't mean assistant. If you look at Genesis 2 and you look at the original words, it's not that. It is, this man can't do it alone and we need some help. I call to the Lord and, who is my help. It's the same word.
Yeah.
I can't do it by
almost
myself.
Every time that word appears in your Old Testament, it almost always refers to God in relationship to us. So it's not a demeaning term. It's actually a term that adds value. It's saying, I can't do this thing apart from this person coming alongside me. And so the idea of helper in the Bible is so much richer. Right. It's not, I need a maid. It is, absolutely I ain't going to make it.
I'm not going to make it.
If I don't have someone here to run alongside me and achieve this goal.
It's almost entirely how Azer, that word, Azer is the Hebrew word for help or helper, is used by people. I won't make it unless my help comes. And usually it's attributed to the Lord. And here we see Adam, before Eve is created, he needs help. Yeah. He needs help. He can't do it by himself.
To accomplish what God's given him to do.
To accomplish a task set before him. And so he has given Eve as a helper, and as a helper at his level, meaning not up here like God in the sky, at his level, this expression of God's help and kindness to accomplish something. So really, marriage thrives when it's not about how do we become as happy as possible together. How can we make our lives more cozy and comfortable, and how can we increase our romance and make everything better? It actually thrives when you go, how do we get the ball down the court for Jesus more?
Yeah, marriage is about mission. It's about mission. We're coming together to do something.
That's right.
We want to see the fame of Jesus increase on the earth, that the knowledge of the glory of the Lord would cover the earth, as the water covers the seas, like Habakkuk says. Like we're on mission here. I've got some stuff to do. And so it really again floods your marriage with so much more meaning to understand like the centrality of God in my marriage means I'm on a mission to do something, and this person by my side is a gift to me to help accomplish that goal. Right. It's like, that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
My marriage exists to glorify God, to beautify him, and to serve the purposes of God on the earth.
Yeah.
To move the kingdom forward, which of course we should all be doing individually, right? So it shouldn't be too much of a shift in marriage, assuming both individuals come going, I'm on mission for the Lord. You just begin to ask now, how do we do that together? And we're seeking to lean on one another's strength to see that happen.
This episode of Clearly is brought to you by our friends at Better Man. Better Man is about unleashing a better masculinity and manhood. It's one that's rooted in God's timeless word. Imagine that. A free resource for churches and men's groups and fathers, brothers, husbands. Better Man is a deep dive into what it means to be a real man. Here's the deal. Too many men today are lost and they're walking around in a masculinity fog. And Better Man is the clarity and conviction you need to be the man God has called you to be. So check them out at betterman.com. That's betterman.com. It's probably worth saying it is not the case that if you're single, that you cannot accomplish the mission of God in your life. Yeah. So maybe just it's worth saying that. Maybe you're listening, you're like, dang. So I'm not, there is no like me accomplishing God's purposes. That's not the case. Absolutely. Paul was single. I think he did quite a bit. What do you think, Kelly?
Right. And actually it kind of speaks kind of negatively of marriage. He's like, if you have to get married, fine. I kind of wish everybody was like me.
I wish everyone was like me, but it's fine. You guys go ahead and get married.
But it does mean that nothing changes when you get married. It's not like you get off the mission field when you get married. If anything, you're just asking a new set of questions. How do we how do we do this together? And that is one great way. I mean, we'll get into this maybe more in the next episode, but when you're assessing marriage partners in dating or even in friendship, and you notice somebody, it's like, wow, we really complement each other. We work well together. And really that was in our friendship. We were not dating. We were just friends. We had groups of friends that we operated in, and we were noticing, and I was noticing that too, because while I had an easy time of being really empathetic toward people, it was always really hard for me to go the extra mile and go, because the gospel's offensive, and to really go, let's spell it out. Let's go there. That was really hard for me. And being around you and watching you do that kind of bolstered my own faith, and my own evangelism began to grow and thrive. Being around you, I was like, wow, I've been asking God for this. I had been for years leading up to even meeting you, praying for an increased boldness to share my faith with a lot of my non-believing friends. And that began to happen as I was friends with you and watching you do that. And so,
and likewise, I had heard of the word empathy before. I didn't know how to spell it, but I'd heard of it. And it was rumored that it existed. And then she, in so many ways, she helped me go like, oh, okay. So like, you don't just have to like, not everybody needs a hammer to the head. Maybe a couple people a day. Not like, not every meeting.
Not every person you meet. Right.
That's right.
So, okay, marriage exists for God's glory. It exists for the advancement of God's kingdom. And marriage exists for your joy. That might sound surprising, but it does exist for your joy. We really felt like, as we thought about talking about marriage with God at the center, that we didn't want it to sound as utterly pragmatic as it might sound up to this point, as if like it's just this
transactional
robotic business arrangement. We're gonna get the ball down the court for the kingdom. It's like, it is a desirable thing for a reason. There's a reason that many people long for it, pray for it, want it. It is for your joy. It is a gift from God, like many of his gifts are, but that is meant for your comfort, for your pleasure, for your companionship, that in the best way, it is a gift. There's a reason that Adam breaks out into song when he sees Eve. And
bone on my bone, flesh on my flesh. That's how I think it went.
It's terrible.
Well, I don't know if there was a melody. I'm just saying, I sense it almost had that kind of sort of like alt rock vibe to it.
Oh my
It was just a thought. I don't know. Pray about it, guys. I don't know.
Anyway, I don't think that's how it probably sounded, but
golly, Kel, just so quick to shut that down.
Hey, you write us a message. You tell us if that's the song you would want to hear, ladies.
That's I hate that.
Oh
I'm never doing that song again. Okay, I'm back.
You back now?
But you know why it's good to say that marriage exists for our joy is because people be hating on marriage, y'all. What's the deal? I mean, like, I don't know how it got uncool, but it's uncool these days.
Well, even culturally, right? Like the age of marriage is just increasing. There is like a kind of wait as long as you can, or not for everybody, but I'm just saying culturally.
I am such a fan. We got married at 20. I'd have got married at 15 if I met her at 15, to be honest with you. She's, I'm in. When we get around college folks and they're dating, they're like, yeah, we're thinking like maybe 26 months from now. I'm like, I will marry you 26 hours from now. Just get your stuff together. Let your parents know. Let's get this thing done. It's amazing.
Well, we did lead a college ministry for a long time. And it was funny because over time, the word spread about our posture about marriage, how pro-marriage we are, how pro-young marriage we are. So there would be couples dating and they're like talking to each other going, don't go talk to Jimmy and Kelly because they'll have you married by next year, which did happen sometimes.
It did.
Because when we sat down to talk to people, it was like they loved dating. They didn't want to get married. There's something fearful, scary about that we were like.
It's almost like there's a commitment in marriage that's not. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it.
But we just really are big fans of marriage. It is a good gift from God. It is desirable. It's good. And of course, you should not be cavalier with it. But it also should be said it's good to get married, and often good to get married young. And I don't think it's something that we need to treat with the I don't know. I just think we should celebrate it appropriately. But it's for your joy and it's for your goodness. It's a gift from God that is meant to be received as such
That's
and
right.
enjoyed. And just to make another comment here to those who are listening who are single, singleness is also a gift.
Facts.
The Bible speaks of both as gifts. Now, they are different in their privileges, right? They each have different distinct things that are joys about them, that are privileges in them, and they both have distinct hard. Both people, married and single, experience things like loneliness and seasons of difficulty that are either complicated by their situation, being married or single, or helped by their situation of being married. So they're different, but they are both gifts. So for us to call marriage a gift is not to call singleness not a gift, or as if it's like an undesirable place to be. Now, if you desire marriage, pray for that and acknowledge it's a small form of suffering to be in something you don't want to be in, but both are gifts.
Yeah.
So
you know what the one bummer is about being single though is you can't sing bone on my bone, flesh on my flesh. You can't. That's not a song that you get to sing. So that's a song for me to sing. So sorry. Fourth point.
yes, let's do it.
See, this is fun. You like being married to me. Come on.
Of course I do. We just talked about that. And also, that song's now going to end up some kind of reel or something from our team now that you did that 3 times. So
yeah. I need to have a chorus now.
Okay.
I'll work on it.
So marriage is for God's glory. It is for the advancement of his kingdom. It's for your joy. You enjoying it does glorify God because it is a good gift. It's good to receive it from him and enjoy it as the gift it is. And marriage is for
the future. By that, we just mean babies.
We do kind of mean that. Yep.
Babies.
The biblical word for this is fruitfulness, but it is for the future. It is for future generations. And this I think is an interesting conversation here because for most of human history, marriage and family, marriage and children have been synonymous. They have been attached ideas. One naturally follows the other. They go together, right? It's like, it's only in recent history with the advancement of birth control, which I'm not even saying I'm anti-birth control. That's not even the point. It's just that technological advancement has now given us the ability to, by and large, separate those two ideas. And now we live in a culture that does not see them attached anymore. You can have marriage without the kids, or you can have kids without the marriage, right? We've kind of separated them as separate things, but the Bible sees them as a tied unit. That marriage and children go together, that we would say biblically one of the functions of your marriage, if you are married, is to be fruitful and multiply, to have children. It doesn't say how many, it doesn't say when, what. We don't want to make rules, or the Bible doesn't make rules, right? We want to talk how the Bible talks. We want to speak like the Bible speaks. And while there's a lot of space in there for that to play out, and a lot of people will desire children and try to have children, and the Lord has said no. So it doesn't mean not having children is sinful. It just means one of the natural byproducts of marriage ought to be family. That is a natural play out. And so as you think about that as a Christian, with God at the center of your marriage, that needs to be part of the equation for you. One of my favorite passages is Psalm 127. And just listen to the language of how God speaks about children in this Psalms is Psalm 127, verses 3-5. It says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gates." Do you hear that? It's like, that is war language. Children are arrows in a quiver in the hand of a warrior. It is not just even for your benefit. This is God's kingdom advancing through a new generation. Each child that you have that's the picture. They're an arrow you are sending out into the world. And you have the time that you have with them is training them up to be that. And so that is one function of God-centered marriages, or that should be our desire, even if God says no to children for a time or for a season or forever, that the desire should be, God, give me this blessing, that I might have these arrows, I might train them up and send them out to be this new generation of believers, taking the gospel to their generation and prepared for that work. That is a good and desirable thing and a right byproduct of our marriages. Again, that pushes against all of the what I want for my life. All of these things do, right? Being about God's glory, God's advancement, having children, all of that. In so many ways, our experience of that has been, it is uprooting self and putting God back in the center, and that can be a painful transition. But like we shared at the beginning of this episode, these have really been the truths that have brought us from the depths of some real hard in our marriage to a lot of flourishing, joy, thriving, peace, and real true fruitfulness by the empowering of the Spirit in our lives and around us.
That's right.
And we want that for more people.
That's right.
God at the center of your marriage is good for your marriage, and it's good for the world around you. Yes. What was that?
Ships, relationships, marriage.
Okay.
Thing.
It's like,
climb aboard.
Yes. Okay, climb aboard. Thanks for joining us today, guys, talking about marriage with God at the center. And we want to leave you with just a question as our listeners. If you're married listening to this and you're a follower of Christ, then ask yourself what of these 4 points we shared, which one maybe needs the most work in you and in your own heart and life as a spouse. And maybe think about how that could change even today, what steps you could take. And if you're single, you might not be married yourself, but you know people who are. And for all of us who are Christians, we should care very deeply that the marriages around us and in our community are telling the right story about God. And so maybe pick one married couple in your life today that you can pray for. And as you end this episode, pray for them. Pray these 4 things for them, that God would bring about the fruit, this good fruit in their marriage.
Next week, we're super stoked because we are getting into the wide world of dating. I don't think we've tackled dating much. Maybe we had one episode about it back in the day. But we're taking a deep dive in it and asking this same question. If God is at the center of all things, how does that impact how we navigate our dating lives as Christians? So tune in to that next week. We're excited about it, and we think it'll be a blessing to you. Hey, subscribe to this podcast. Get this at the top of your feed. Get it in front of more people by doing that. We sure would appreciate that. You can join our mailing list or email list right down in the show notes.
We share lots of fun things now in our extra bonus show notes and emails.
You'll have a ball if you sign up. And you can help us by supporting this podcast and by supporting our team by going to patreon.com and searching for Jimmy and Kelly Needham and becoming a Patreon partner with us to help us continue to make these episodes, make this content. We want to serve more people with this God-centered, God-obsessed news. So help us along with that, and you'll get to be part of our live audience if you do that, among other things. We love you guys, and we will see you next week. Cheers.